interesting year, and certainly with the pandemic and the social unrest in Louisville, and it's been it's been interesting. Alicia Keys tweeted out that I and my counterpart in the Senate, Senator Morgan McGarvey, were like really, really powerful, and I had 6,000 phone calls from all over the world urging me to fire the police officers in Louisville.
Really?
And my email got shut down a few times, and had to try to reach out on social media and say, we're with you, but we're not the decision makers in this.
Wow. Yeah.
That's been kind of interesting. That's been kind of
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, so you started talking earlier a little bit, and I know you were just kind of talking about being in this position of leadership now, and for any of my women or men who are watching this, can you talk a little bit about kind of what that climb was like for you? Because I know you're talking about how important it is, but I wonder if they really get, like, when you talked about how historic this transition is really, for you, for the other people who are kind of watching your climb, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it didn't happen overnight. It was years and years of building relationships and working with other people and kind of proving myself. And, I think, when you think back, I started in the General Assembly in 1995, and things were very different then. And so, I think I was one of 5 women in the House at that time. And now we have around 30 women, I believe. 20 of them are from my caucus. So things have changed a lot. So it's, at one point I didn't think that leadership was a role that I wanted or that I could achieve. I've always been really, really interested in policy. My caucus always, tells me, oh, there she goes nerding out. I love policy. I love sitting around a table with people who don't think the same way and figuring out what you have in common and what your common goals are and trying to work towards that. So I focused on that for most of my career. But then as, people turned over and new people kept coming in, and, I would try to mentor other legislators, whether it was female or not, and just developed a whole lot of relationships in that regard. And Rocky Atkins, who had been the long-time floor leader, both in the majority and the minority, left in December to go work for the new governor, Governor Andy Beshear. And everybody in my caucus just looked at me and said, well, of course, you're who should be our new leader. And I'm like, what? And they're like, no, who else could do it? It's, you have to do this. And so I ran for this. You're voted on by the caucus, and I was elected unanimously. No one else ran against me. So I'm like, oh, darn, I got to do this now. And, I had to develop another set of skills. Had to really work on some things because, as I said before, I was a real policy nerd and loved working across the aisle. So I have a very collaborative nature. Well, there's sometimes as a leader, especially in the minority caucus, that you're the person who has to kind of fight back a little bit and be not so collaborative. So those have been some things that have been really not difficult, but it's been a new role for me. And I've had to learn how to adapt and figure out when I need it to be that, loyal opposition to things that are going on, and when I need it to extend a hand and say, you know what, I think there's some real common ground here. Can we work on that together, as, across the aisle. So, you never stop growing, you never stop learning, you never stop developing new talents and skills. I'm going to be 62 in December, and I'm still learning. And I enjoy that. I enjoy those challenges. It's, I think for women, especially my age, we were brought up to be pleasing. We're people pleasers sometimes. And in life, in politics, sometimes you have to know when you need to be in that role and when you need to be in the role that says, no, here's the line and we're not going over this line.
Well, and I was going to ask you, like, what kind of things do you think that you did to really cultivate finding your voice or finding your own personal power? Like, do you think that those are important in your position, not only just in kind of your career, but in your life to kind of move into that role? Because it's not really one, I guess, that you can kind of put on and take off. Like when you find that personal power, you find that ability. Any thoughts on just how you did that, how you cultivated that, things that worked, things that didn't?
Well, I think you need to be real. You have to really decide what your values are and where the boundaries are for you. And my dad was a labor leader. He was president of his labor union, and he used to always tell me, in debate and in anything I did, you don't take everything to the mat. You don't fight about everything. You pick your battles. And I think that's something that I learned really, really early on in the legislative process. Every day's a new day. There's always another issue, and you may be, just mad as a wet hen one day because you didn't get your way, or you weren't able to convince people of what you thought was right. But you have to know that tomorrow it all starts over again, and there's another issue, and there's another bill to debate, and somebody that you were completely at odds with yesterday, today you may be on the same team. So you have to learn not to take those things personally, that it really is about the issue, and not get your feelings hurt, and just suck it up sometimes. And there are a lot of skills that are needed, and sometimes it's a skill of calming everybody down, and sometimes it's a skill of firing everybody up, depending on what's needed. And I will say this about my caucus, is that they are true to their values and what is important to them. They are, I think, amazingly tied into their districts and their jobs, and being the voice for people who don't have a voice. And that makes it really easy, because there are very few issues that come before the General Assembly that I don't know in advance how my caucus is going to be on them.
Okay.
So that makes things a whole lot easier. I think one of the most important things that I've learned over the years to do is listen. And people tell you what they need if you just listen to them. Whether it's a constituent, whether it's a member of the caucus, whether it's a member of the other caucus. If you smile more, talk less, from Hamilton, you'll find out where people's hearts are. And I always say there's an answer to every problem. Every problem has an answer to it. You just got to make sure you're listening to the right people and the right set of people.
Well, and one of the things that I love the most about you, and we've talked about this before, and some of my folks watching this will be like, oh, I remember meeting her. Is you are one of the folks that, like I said earlier, you came to the school, you and I talked briefly in class, and then I'm pretty sure I obnoxiously texted you or emailed you or something for a while, and then we finally connected. But that you did come out, and you spent time with my alumni, you spent time in our program, and just kind of listen to what their feedback was, and listen to how the decisions that are being made in Frankfort or on the ground are affecting the people, like in their on their front doorsteps, and how they're affecting them in their communities. And I think that's one of the things that I love about you in terms of our connection, is I do think that that's a skill. Not only is it like you're not lip service, like, oh yeah, I hear what you're saying, great, blah blah blah, but like, hey, let me take this back, let me mull over it, let's talk about it some more, let me get some good questions together. And I think that's a massive benefit in leadership, because I think that that's important. You have to know who you're leading in order to lead well. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about what you thought about that in terms of just hitting the ground, listening to people, kind of getting the stories. For me, I obviously work in the field of addiction. And so that's kind of where you and I have met up and talked a lot about. What's your thoughts about what you're hearing from your community, and what your steps are, what your role is in working towards a solution there?
Well, I'm one of those people. Some people can read things and just go right on. I got to touch it, feel it, and see it. I want to see the people who are really. I want to hear the stories. I want to look at people's faces and see all that. When I couldn't understand about NAS babies, I went and signed up and spent about 6 months holding and rocking babies. I really, when I was interested in working with about the plight of foster kids, I went and spent time with foster kids and talked to them. My own personal story is I lost a nephew to a heroin overdose, and he had lived with that addiction for a little over a year. And so I always say sometimes you pick your passions and sometimes the passions pick you. And so, back in 2015, my nephew died in 13, and in 15 we worked on a huge reform bill about addiction and at that time it was specifically heroin, but it can addiction is addiction is addiction. And we had a little task force of legislators, and we talked to all kinds of people. And kind of one night in the middle of the night, I just sat up in bed and I thought, we never talked to anybody in recovery. We never talked to anybody in recovery. How could that? How did we miss that? So I started reaching out to people who worked with folks, and I really wanted to hear their stories. I wanted to hear the stories of folks that came out the other side, folks that were in active recovery. What worked for them, what didn't work. Just trying to really understand the recovery side of it. I kind of had treatment. I understood, addiction, I had a good grasp on that, but I really didn't have an understanding of what worked in recovery. And, what I found out is it's not cookie cutter, that, for 100 folks that struggle with this disease, there could be 100 different paths for them.
Did anything surprise you?
I'm sorry?
Did anything surprise you? Like anything you hear surprise you? Like, wow, I never thought that, or anything that stick out to you?
I was in personally in such a dark place that I didn't think anybody got out on the other side. Okay. So it was a surprise to me to meet these, strong, wonderful folks that did. So, I because of my own experience with it, I thought, it's a death sentence. No one ever gets out.
Got it.
And so, one of the first groups that I talked to were young people in recovery, which is a group in Jefferson County, and they've really opened my eyes about a whole lot of things. I think for those of us, we've heard about AA and NA, and we think, oh, that 12-step program, that's what everybody has to do. It's abstinence only, and that's what's going to work for everybody. Well, what I found out is it doesn't. It does work for some people. For some people, that path and being abstinent from it is that works for them. That works for them. For other people, it doesn't work. That medically assisted treatment works for them. Some people find it through spiritual ways, paths. Everybody, it's a very unique disease. And we have to be, as policymakers, and this is where it comes back to policymakers, we got to be really careful that we don't write into the budget or into law certain paths where folks are left behind, because that's not the path that works for them. At the time that we were doing it, medically assisted treatment, though it's been around for years and years, was just really starting to kind of be, popular is not the right word, but was being used in really, really effective ways. Methadone's been around for a long time and worked for folks for a very long time, but it was still had, some stigma to it. So I think we're moving on to where those types of treatment don't have the stigma that they had even 5 years ago. And as policymakers, we need to be open to that, and we need to listen to people and put our preconceived notions kind of aside. So I always say you have to go into policymaking, and it sounds so, oh, that's just really cliche. You have to go in with an open mind and an open heart. And I go into so many meetings and I sit down and I look at all the experts around the table and I said, I don't know what I don't know. Y'all need to tell me what I don't know. And be open to hearing that. There are very few things I'm expert on.
Well, and that's a good thing, really. For a lot of us, because you hear that saying that says if you're the expert in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Right.
Because if you think you know it all, you're like, man, you don't stay open-minded. You're not willing to learn. So I think that's a good. I think that especially when you're talking about, obviously, you want to be. When you're in that leadership role, like you said, you can't literally have lived everybody's life or walked everybody's shoes. So, to kind of say, hey, what's going to be good for the people in Lexington might not be the same thing that's good for the people who are in Lebanon Junction or it might not
Right.
be good for the people that are in, you know, even within Louisville, there's so many
Mhm.
different pockets of experience and change. You know, if you're living one area to the other, and you know, for me, I work in Bullitt County, so my people who are in Mount Washington are not getting the same experience that those who are in Hillview in schools and,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, environment, just even in the road, you know,
Mhm.
so it's hard. I can imagine in trying to create policies that are going to govern all people.
Mhm.
It's kind of a struggle to pull all of that information into good decision making.
Mhm. And I try to keep, okay, who is this going to affect? Who is it going to affect differently? Am I taking in consideration all the, is there transportation available? Is there childcare available? Am I missing any piece that would hold people back? Whether it's addiction, or education or criminal justice. Um, you
Mhm.
know, I I think that for so many years we have created policy among, um, what legislators lived. Well, for a long time, legislators were pretty much affluent white men,
Right.
so their view of the world is going to be different. So
Mhm.
I try to put myself in the position. Certainly the perspective I see as a middle-aged white woman, um,
Mhm.
who's lived in Shiva most of her life. So I have to think about, how does this affect people of color? How does this affect people, who are on the margins, economic wise? How does it affect people who, have more resources? Because, I think sometimes, in a lot of these issues, when we're talking about disease and mental health, it may be even harder on somebody who comes from an affluent background to reach out for help, because there's, could be more stigma in it. So how do we make things accessible for everybody?
Mhm.
And that's a journey that we all are on, is putting ourselves in the place of other people. For me, it's a faith journey, it's a spiritual, and a very personal journey to, say, well, okay, this is how I feel. Can somebody feel differently, and why would they feel differently?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that something that you encourage other leaders? So let's say I have some aspiring leaders watching us today. When you were talking earlier, one of the things I love about you saying, hey, I wanted to understand about these babies, so I went to the hospital. I wanted to understand about foster care, so I went to foster. Is that something that you would tell all leaders? Hey, like if this is what you want to know about, get in, kind of get into the grind with people, see what's really going on.
Well,
Do you recommend?
I do really recommend that. Now, a lot of people, that's not their thing. So, I'm okay with that. I've had some really interesting conversations, with the Republican leadership about sexism and racism. And
Mhm.
sometimes they look at me like I'm crazy when I say things. And, but I think sometimes I get through to them when I say, I understand that where you're coming from and your life experiences, probably there are a lot that we share, because, most of us are white. And, I'm like, you have to look at maybe how somebody who didn't come from that life experience may be perceiving what you're saying or the actions that you're taking.
Mhm.
Um, we had, a situation, where the new president of U of L was invited, and the speaker and I got along very well. He's a pretty affluent, older white man. And he had made this decision that nobody from now on was going to be honored on the floor of the House. Well, when the new U of L president, who's a female, who is of Indian descent, was the first person they decided this policy should be for, it
Oh.
was very hurtful for
Mhm.
a lot of people, not just women and not just people of color. It seemed very hurtful for them. And
Mhm.
I will have to say that, when we behind closed doors talked about it, I think he got it. I think he finally understood, oh, yeah, probably wasn't the best idea.
Mhm.
So and I think sometimes, um, because in this general assembly, I've been around a long time, and folks have known me for a long time, and I've built up. I've tried my best to always be honest with folks and always be open and transparent. So I think I can have sometimes those really difficult conversations with folks, that make them
Yeah.
uncomfortable. I mean, they're uncomfortable conversations, and you can't shy away from things that make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, I would
Uh,
agree with that. I would
there's
agree with that.
I have a cat that thinks she's a baby.
Well, and you know, when you were saying that, it just made me think of that. Like, you know, one of the things that I look to do in our program, and I think you and I talked about this briefly the other day, is being able to launch sort of that bystander program, you know, where we can empower people who see and, you know, these things going on and they hear things. You know, I would love to believe that the vast majority of people are good and don't have ill intentions against other people. And so it's trying to figure out how to empower people to have those conversations, to speak up, and to kind of have that voice when they see things going on. You know, don't let somebody hanging out there by themselves, you know, feeling isolated or, you know, segregated against for the greater good of for the greater population. I mean, like more people are saying, you know, it's more comfortable for me to allow one person to take the heat than to get involved. And so trying to empower people to get actively engaged. What's your thoughts about that in terms of like a leadership position? Like you were talking about, sometimes it's hard to have those conversations. How do you find the strength or the willingness to sort of stand out there? And when sometimes your voice is not the popular voice, or what you're saying is not the popular opinion.
Well, I think you have to be self-aware. You have to know when your buttons have been pushed and when something's made you angry. It's okay to be angry. We all get angry. It's you know, it's not always the greatest place to come from.
Sure.
Anger, but you know, we all get angry. It's, you know, I get angry at injustice. I get angry if, you know, I don't think somebody's being fair. But I think for me, and I think for me, it's something that's come with experience and age, is that sometimes I'm not worrying about what other people think of me anymore. You know, it's like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I look like. This is it.
What you see is what you get.
What you see is what you get. And if I make you uncomfortable, and I think you have to be, I don't go in it to make them feel uncomfortable. When I want to have a difficult conversation, you know, I want to, you know, say, okay, let's just lay this on the table. This is between us. Tell me why you feel this way. Let me tell you why I feel this way. You know, I really, again, it's listening sometimes more than talking. But some of the, you know, I guess the last, especially the last couple of months with the unrest and seeing things through new eyes. You know, we've had 400 years in this country to get equality right, and we've not done it. And I'm probably going to be speaking a lot more in the coming weeks and months and years about, you know, inequality and how we treat people of color in this country. Because I feel like of all the horrible things that have happened, not only in Louisville, but you know, around the country, we may have this opportunity to make real change. And I don't see us let that opportunity go by. I think it is just, it's just been too long. And I've been doing a lot of work spiritually, faith-based, and otherwise with really trying to come to terms with my own white privilege and how I can use that privilege to help other people, and where I have real blind spots, and we all have them. You know, a lot of times in my studying or I'm taking a class, I'm like, oh, ouch, I did that. So I think it's, as someone who's in a leadership position, you owe it to the folks that you work with to do that self-awareness. I have to be careful that I don't overthink everything.
Yeah, I get that.
I know that about myself. It's like, okay, I'm really going to overthink that. And sometimes you got to let go. Sometimes you have to admit, you know what, I made a mistake. That was not the best decision. And sometimes you just have to let it go and move forward. We're all human. And if you're going to give yourself that grace, you have to give it to other people as well. Okay, that person had a really bad day, and they may have said something really hurtful, but why were they acting out in that way? So, it really is just about accepting your own humanity and the humanity in other folks.
Well, especially when you're talking about a nature of like texting, Twitter, social media, like anything that can be said or done can be twisted or misread or misunderstood. I'm learning that was the situation I had not too long ago, where what I said was not translated well into what I meant. And I'm like, and you kind of default back to like, guys, you know me, you know my heart. That's not my intention, but that's not how it came across. And so I think sometimes, especially in certain positions, like what you say impacts people. Or what you do, and it's like, that's not what I meant, or that's not what I was going with. And it's just so charged right now that I think there is a lot of that anger. And like you said, I think everybody has the intent or has the right to be angry, be irate, be appalled, all of that stuff because of everything that's going on. But I think there has to come to this point where we have to get through that emotional response so that we can get into solution response.
Right.
How do we move into like, and I agree with you. I said to somebody the other day, we have been doing the same solutions for so long that are ineffective. Why do we keep doing them?
Because they're comfortable to us, and change is hard. Change is really, really hard. That's one thing I keep, reminding myself when we're doing policy changes is like, suddenly it's like, people will say it ain't working, but I'm afraid of changing it.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the other day, and I was going to see if you could talk a little bit about it. You mentioned, so you guys are working on a task force?
We have the South Louisville Task Force, which hasn't met for a while because of the pandemic. We had a South Louisville Opioid Task Force, which I think came one time.
I did.
And we are in the process of kind of rethinking that a little bit and making it more of a community, all the problems in the community. But I'll have more on that later. But I'm also been named to the General Assembly has a new task force on addictions and recovery. And it's all legislators, House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats. From the House, Russell Weber, who is from Bullitt County, is the co-chair, and Lisa Wilner, who's a Democrat rep from Jefferson County, and I are on that task force, and we're going to meet Tuesday. So I'm really excited to see what direction we're going to go in, what things we're going to talk about, and setting some goals. I've been very concerned during this pandemic about folks that are struggling with recovery or struggling. Zoom's great, but sometimes it's hard to read everybody's body language and getting feedback from them. I know in talking to some other folks in recovery, there's been an effort to keep recovery meetings going through technology, but some of the numbers we're seeing is that there are folks that are struggling, and it's not working quite so well for some folks. So, but I think with all the other issues that are in the news right now, that sometimes that gets lost. Here and there I will see an article about overdoses are increasing, doses are increasing because people are so isolated, and I'm really concerned about that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, like especially when you look at those rural communities where Wi-Fi connection and those things, really people struggled with getting connected or staying connected. So it's different when you can try to at least come in. But yeah, like a lot of folks I know just struggled with maintaining it just because of distance. Like you're out in the middle of, one of these more rural communities, and it's hard to connect to anybody. And so it's, for us, at least in the treatment, I'm grateful. I'm 100% grateful, because for us in our program, we've stayed pretty busy. Like, like I was saying to you earlier, when the COVID stuff kind of kicked in, we rolled right over to Zoom, and we were still we were still suiting up and showing up. So I'm honored because of that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that also has to do, we already had a committed fellowship.
Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
for some of these folks that were brand new coming into it, it just completely severed that beginning stages of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I
And
think
I
that
think,
was
you
really
know,
strong.
self-isolation, you know, addiction, it does become a very private, secretive, and when you're isolated, you can kind of fall back into those kinds of same practices.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and you know, people with other disorders, you know, mental health disorders. I think it's been really hard for some folks. You know, I crave alone time. I'm like, oh, I would love to be locked in my house for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. You take a break, no phone, no text. You're like, I'm
Right.
good. I'm good.
Fine. It worked for me because, you know, everybody was, you know, I was still having to go into Frankfort during all of this because even though we were doing a lot of things remotely, leadership had to be there. So I'm like, I missed all the good quarantine time.
Well, I'll tell you, like for some of my folks, you know, and I know for me, I'm included in that, it wasn't necessarily as negative as some folks kind of experienced and felt it. And mostly because it was a good time for me to slow down and spend time with my kids. It was good for me to slow down and kind of take care of, you know. So for some folks, I think it was good. You know, you were talking earlier about spiritual foundation. Like one of the things that I was encouraging my folks to do in that time is get in touch with you, journal, you know, do some reading, do some, you know, TED Talk watching, you know, here's some videos, like really focus on self-improvement during this time because life doesn't slow down like this a lot. You know, and if you can take this time to sort of look at the strengths in this moment, like we're powerless over certain parts, but let's take advantage of that time. And so I think a lot of folks did that too. And you kind of found that there was this really interesting balance between what people really did with that downtime.
Right. You know, I was laughing because I have a great niece and great nephew who are 5 and 7, 7 and 9. Oh, I guess they're 7 and 9 now, and they live in Kentucky, but they're not in my neighborhood, so I don't see them quite as often. And because they were at home and so bored, they called their old great aunt on you know, video chat, and so I spent a whole lot of time with them during this process, one-on-one, and so that was a positive for me, is that, you know, and my father was ill during this time, so I spent a whole lot of time with my parents that I normally probably wouldn't have. So there have been some positives for me in this. But I'm ready for it to be over. But
Me too. Yeah, like you said earlier, I know they're talking about making some transitions in terms of wearing masks and continuing to keep public safe. And
mm-hmm.
you know, I think it's just people are tired of sort of having the confines of what I need to do, what I need to do, what I need to do, and you're seeing some of that resistance
Yeah.
with folks, and I think they're just tired. You
I
know,
think and I think people are ready for it to be over. But please, if you're listening, please wash your hands, social distance, wear your mask. That's how we get out of this. And I know I'm hearing from parents that, oh, please, Lord, let's get these kids back in school. Well, the way that we do that is by following those really important protective things. And wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance. There is an end that we all really do. And Kentucky's done great in this. You know, when you look at our numbers are really, really good. But, you know, it's every day, you know, there for a while I was watching the governor, you know, every day. And now I look for the press release because, you know, I hate that, you know, so many people are sick and we're losing people that we don't need to lose. And young people too. It's been
all right, Miss Joni, you ready for the hard question round?
oh no, yeah.
Sure, why not?
If I
All
don't
right.
like it.
What do you think, for anybody who is listening or watching this video today, what is the most important thing that you hope that they get away from our conversation? Like, if they could walk away with one thing, what do you hope it is?
I hope that folks listening know that anything is possible. That, you know, setting goals and working toward them is really, really important. Nothing worthwhile comes easy. You know, my journey has not always been easy. But things are possible. And, you know, I think I would hope everybody would think about having a role in lawmaking or public life in some way, whether it's a school board, local councils, state rep, U.S. Congress. Um, I would hope that the person that is someday going to, take my place and represent me is going to be a real person who's had struggles and who hasn't done everything perfect. Because I've done some really stupid things in my life. I understand that, oh gosh, people can make bad decisions and they shouldn't have to pay for that the rest of their life, because I didn't pay for some of my bad decisions the rest of my life. So I want a real person I want a real person who's president. I want a real person who's, in the Congress. I want a real person who's governor, that understands that not everybody has the same path, and some people need more help. And some people make bad decisions, but they're still good people and they still deserve to be treated equally. So I hope everybody out there listens and thinks about what I need to do to give back to my community, whether it's run for public office or help somebody run for public office or do some really good volunteer work out there, and that we all have a role to play. And please, please, please vote. We're trying to make it easier for folks to vote. I love the mail-in vote. We saw real excitement around that and a lot of people engaged in the primary. If you don't vote, you're letting somebody else have your power. On election day, everybody has an equal amount of power because we all have one vote. And if you don't use your vote, you've given your power to somebody else.
Fair enough. I get that. Do you think, and it's funny because a lot of times when our clients or the people that we see, even that are maybe just in conversation, there's always a lot of buzz. And, I do a lot of like family court stuff and, and our clients at times or families at times feel like they really don't have a voice in policy changes, or really don't have, it's kind of this idea like, oh, the system's broken. You hear that over and over again. The system's broken. The system's broken. From your perspective, is it really effective for people to write you or write their representatives? Is it really effective to call and send emails? Like, do you feel like people's voices matter?
I think they do. I mean, I certainly, in my position, I talk to a lot of people. Not all of them are from my district because I have more of a statewide. But let me tell you, we all have to run for office. We all need voters. And so every legislator I've ever met is really interested in what their constituents think. And some of the best ideas I ever got came from my constituents who called and said, I was in court and this happened and, it didn't seem right. And here's what would make it right. Or this happened in my kid's school. And, I think, this would change things for the better. It's, frontline people who are experiencing life that can tell us most about what needs to happen. Okay. So, whether or not you're able to vote, because of your age or other circumstances, and we're working on a lot of those circumstances now to make sure have a real deep belief that, even if you've messed up and made a bad decision and maybe been classified as a felon, after you've paid your whatever penalty we as a state decided, you ought to be given back your rights. And I'm, we're working on that all the time. But regardless of where you are in that process, you are a citizen of the state and you have the right to talk to your state rep and your state senator. And you know what? If they're not listening to you, y'all need to replace them.
Okay. Excellent. So a more gender question, just because we're so excited about you climbing the ladder and breaking through ceilings for women. Any thoughts specific to women who are kind of listening to your story or listening to what you've shared today in terms of the climb? Any role models or places to kind of look or things that kind of helped you on your path?
Oh, I had great family support. That's really, my parents both were, you can do anything you want to do. They made no difference between me and my brother on those kinds of things. But I had some, when I went into the General Assembly, Representative Mary Lou Marzian and I have been, joined at the hip for 26 years now, supporting each other. There are the women that are in my caucus now are just amazing. We had the first sitting legislator in the House have a baby during session.
Okay.
Josie Raymond, who is from Jefferson County, a young mom, had her third baby. And so up until COVID hit, we had a caucus baby for a while. And um, I was always like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she came back so soon. But to see her standing on the floor of the House debating issues, holding an infant, it gives me chills right now to think about it, So, we need all voices. I've recruited a lot of women to run this fall, quite a few people of color, but we need all voices. We need people from all walks of life. And, I've been working within the system about how we make it easier for young parents, whether they're women or men, that how we make it easier for young parents to be able to serve in the General Assembly, because that's a voice that is needed. So, do we need to, think about childcare? Do we need to think about, it's amazing to me how many women, staff and people who are lobbying who had no place to breastfeed or pump. And, my office for a while became the place where women came to because there was no other good place for it to happen. And so, we've been working on things like that, because there shouldn't be barriers, whether it's somebody with a disability, whether it's young parents, whether it's older folks, we need old folks too, because they have a different perspective too. We need, so, I've been really looking at what barriers people have to serving in this General Assembly. So, if there's a barrier for you, we need to be thinking about that. And just because there's not somebody that looks like you serving in the General Assembly doesn't mean there can't be. We 2 years ago elected the first immigrant, Representative Nima Kulkarni, who was born in India and immigrated here as a child. And she became the first Indian immigrant to serve in the General Assembly in Kentucky. Can you believe that?
Wow, that's awesome.
Isn't that awesome? So just because there's not somebody that looks like you doesn't mean that you can't do it. When I was, goodness, when I was a teenager and was studying the General Assembly at that time, never dreamed that I would be there because it was all white guys. It just seemed like something that was an option for me. Well, we need to break all those barriers down, because true good policy comes when all voices are heard. So for all of you there, if you think this is something you want to do, you let me know. And when COVID craziness is over and you want to come shadow in Frankfort, you let Stacy know and we will arrange that.
I would love it. Well, I told them after I left your office in Frankfort last time, I told the women, I said, I'm going to see if Joni will let us pile up and just come see her office and walk around, because they were very excited.
That would be great. I would love to have you.
I was thinking about the secret hallways or something. I was walking down, how I got lost underneath. I was like, I just kind of walked around, and but I think it is one of those things. Like, I think a lot of times, especially in certain communities and certain areas, that people don't think that they can get there. People, it's like, oh, that's great for other people, but that'll never be me, or that'll never be my kids. And so I think that you, like I said, for one, you've come into our community and you've sat down and kind of talked to us and got to hear a little bit. And at that time, again, it was in Bullitt County. But, I think being able to have that sort of bridge, for lack of better words, that lets people know, you can cross this. Like, this might be where you're at, but we all need representation. We all need to have those goals and dreams. I think that's a fantastic thing. I think it's a great thing of what you're doing. And I'm so happy to hear, just about these task force and these different assemblies that you guys are coming up with to really address some of those things. And as we've said before, if we can be a part of that voice and have any information or whatever, they're welcome to come, or you're welcome to come. And our folks are always grateful, I think, to share their story. Most people will say, if my story will help change one person, or if my story will help change just one thing that can make another family's life easier, then hey, let's do it.
Well, and we need that, because again, legislators aren't experts on everything, and very, very often we don't know what we don't know. So having folks who have walked in that journey to come and let us know what's working, what's not working, what needs to change is really, really important. I will have to get you the link for this task force. So folks, right now folks can't come in person because takes the whole room for us to social distance, but it is available on YouTube. So I will get that to you, Stacy. So Tuesday at 3, if you all are, have some time and want to watch us, make sure that you all can do that, because I think it's real important.
Okay, that would be awesome. All right, one more question and then we're free. You ready?
Right.
What is your favorite quote and why?
Oh my gosh. It's probably the one about leadership, that true leaders don't make followers. True leaders make other leaders. And I can't remember how he said it.
That's okay.
And I try to, I try to live that. I really do. I try to make sure that, especially in my caucus and other people around me, that I'm making sure to help them move up, because, there are a lot of people who help me, men and women, and, who saw something in me that maybe I didn't see in myself, and pushed me sometimes, challenged me sometimes, and just helped me sometimes. And, the other day I was calling a constituent back, and, I had not had a great day, and was trying to help his mother do something, his older mother. And he said, I don't live in your district anymore, but he goes, I just have to tell you, I'm so proud of you. And when I see you, I see somebody who's doing things for all the good reasons. And I don't say that because, oh, I'm so great, but it's, don't forget to tell people, when they've made a difference in your life, and that they've been helpful to you. And so because of the way that made me feel, I've been trying to be more aware of it, and telling people, how much they mean to me and what a great job they're doing. Just like you, Stacy, I've so much enjoyed getting to know you, and I so admire your passion. And oh my gosh, you don't let anything stand in your way, and I'm so glad to learn from you and to work with you, and also to call you my friend. So everybody, let's everybody today think about somebody who's been very special to them, and maybe reach out to them, because everybody's having a hard time right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I thank you for that. I agree with you. I think, we get on the ground, we hit the ground running, we do what comes natural to us. And I think sometimes it's the end of the day. I think T.D. Jake said this best one time. I was listening to him speak, and he said, for frontline workers, he said, sometimes we go out into this world and we pour so much into other people that to encourage, that we go home empty and often discouraged, because we don't take the time to fill our own plate, and we don't take the time to fill up, on what we need to keep going. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that's great. Like, even people with great intentions, even people who are passionate about what they love to do can burn out if they don't take care of themselves. And, I think, and that's why I was asking you that question about sort of your rise, because I think it's important to talk about, like, we've been trials, we have tribulations, we got there eventually. But it was not unicorns and butterflies most of the time. And that a lot of times you'll have people who stand in your way, and then you have those people who elevate.
I ran for leadership many times. 2 times I ran and lost by 1 vote. It was awful. But you know what? I got the next day and found another passion to work on, and thought, okay, if that's not where I'm supposed to be, I'm supposed to be somewhere else. I always tell people, I was very lucky. The first time I ran for office, I won. I won by 10 votes. So don't let anybody tell you your votes don't count. But most people who run for office are not going to win the first time. It's, really unusual when that happens. And some people get mad and never come back. And then, there are other people that keep at it because they feel this real calling to do it. There's no guarantee that we're always going to be successful. But most of us are going to have another opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for
thank you. It was great.
Like I said, it's something I've been really working on, and one of the things that I consistently say during this show and on this channel is, hi, we're just people. Like, we're people having conversations. I jokingly but not jokingly tell folks that watch it, they're like, wow, it was like watching a conversation. I'm like, it kind of is. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is a conversation you could catch me and Joni having, while we're eating lunch. Like, this is kind of how we talk about stuff. Because in truth, it's, we're people. You're having the best way I describe myself, and I jokingly say this, but I mean it, is, we're ordinary people who make the decision to make one extraordinary choice, right? We're just
Like,
ordinary people who do something just a little bit extra
mhm,
every day, and it changes the world. At least it
mhm.
changes what's going on around us.
Right, right.
And so,
And, if everybody does their part, what a great, it all adds up. There's nothing too small.
so thank you so much. I appreciate
All
having you.
right. I hope to have lunch with you soon.
Let me see if I can,